Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. In today's story, I think I'm going to do this in two parts. This is a very interesting, semi-intellectual story that has to deal with Google, with algorithms, with surveillance. And this story in particular is, where does Google's true origin, or does Google's true origin partly lie within the CIA and the NSA research grants that were developed for mass surveillance? The intelligence community in Silicon Valley have a long history. And so we all know about the eye in the sky, satellites watching us, red light cameras, surveillance cameras everywhere, doorbell cameras, phone towers pinging your cell phone, banking, debit card, credit cards, digital transactions and footprints every day. And of course, tracking and digital footprints on your computer usage and Google searches is also another digital footprint. We are constantly being followed and leaving our mark and our behaviors to the algorithms. This story has to do with the Patriot Act that was formed right after 9/11. The proverbial question: is our privacy being invaded by our government's intelligence / defense agencies like the CIA and or the NSA? And is that okay for the preservation of a safe society? Is it necessary for Big Brother to watch our every move under the auspices of public safety? These are the questions with a wide, diverse array of answers. And remember, Edward Snowden back in 2013, who was a former NSA intelligence contractor, he was the one who leaked classified documents revealing the existence of global surveillance programs. And this was back in 2013. Are we constantly being watched is the proverbial question. So, does Google's true origin partly lie in CIA and NSA research grants for mass surveillance? Let's do a deep dive. 2 decades ago, the U.S. intelligence community worked closely with Silicon Valley in an effort to track citizens in cyberspace. And Google is at the heart of that origin story. Some of the research that led to Google's ambitious creation was funded and coordinated by a research group established by the intelligence community to find ways to track individuals and groups online. The intelligence community hoped that the nation's leading computer scientists could take non-classified information and user data, combine it with what would become known as the internet, and began to create for-profit commercial enterprises to suit the needs of both intelligence community and the public. They hope to direct the supercomputing revolution from the start in order to make sense of what millions of human beings did inside this digital information network. That collaboration has made a comprehensive public-private mass surveillance state possible today. The story of the deliberate creation of the modern mass surveillance state includes elements of Google's surprising and largely unknown origin. How did Google come about? It is a somewhat different creation story than the one the public has heard, and explains what Google co-founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page set out to build and why. But this isn't just the origin story of Google. It's the origin story of the mass surveillance state and the government money that funded it. So here's the backstory. The intelligence community in Silicon Valley. This is how it all kind of got started. In the mid-1990s, the intelligence community in America began to realize that they had an opportunity. The supercomputing community was just beginning to migrate from university settings into the private sector, led by investments from a place that would become known as Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, California, Stanford University. A digital revolution was underway, one that would transform the world of data gathering and how we make sense of massive amounts of information. The intelligence community wanted to shape Silicon Valley's supercomputing efforts in their inception so they would be useful for both military and homeland security purposes. Could this supercomputing network, which would become capable of storing terabytes of information, make intelligent sense of the digital trail that human beings leave behind? Answering this question was of great interest to the intelligence community. Intelligence gathering may have been their world, but the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and the National Security Agency, the NSA, follow these acronyms and these alphabet government groups. The CIA and the NSA, National Security Agency, had come to realize that their future was likely to be profoundly shaped outside the government. It was at a time when military and intelligence budgets within the Clinton administration were in jeopardy, and the private sector had vast resources at their disposal. The intelligence community wanted to conduct mass surveillance for national security purposes. It would require cooperation between the government and the emerging supercomputing companies. So to do this, they began researching out to the scientists at American universities who were creating this supercomputing revolution. These scientists were developing ways to do what no single group of human beings sitting at workstations in the NSA and CIA could ever hope to do: gather huge amounts of data and make intelligent sense of it. And here is a rich history of the government's science funding. There was already a long history of collaboration between America's best scientists and the intelligence community, from the creation of the atomic bomb and satellite technology to efforts to put man on the moon. In fact, the internet itself was created because of an intelligence effort. In the 1970s, the agency responsible for developing emerging technologies for military, intelligence, and national security purposes is called the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. You may have heard it. It's called DARPA. That's the acronym, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It linked 4 supercomputers to handle massive data transfers. It handed the operations off to the National Science Foundation, the NSF, a decade or so later, which proliferated the network across thousands of universities and eventually the public, thus creating the architecture and scaffolding of the World Wide Web. Silicon Valley was no different, but in the mid-1990s, the intelligence community was seeding funding to the most promising supercomputing efforts across academia, guiding the creation of efforts to make massive amounts of information useful for both the private sector as well as the intelligence community. They funded these computer scientists through an unclassified, highly compartmentalized program that was managed for the CIA and the NSA by large military and intelligence contractors. It was called the Massive Digital Data Systems Project, MDDS, the Massive Digital Data Systems Project. So what is that? MDDS was introduced to several dozen leading computer scientists at Stanford, Caltech, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, and others in a white paper that described what the CIA, the NSA, DARPA, and other agencies hope to achieve. The research would largely be funded and managed by unclassified science agencies like NSF, which would allow the architecture to be scaled up in a private sector if it managed to achieve what the intelligence community hoped for. And remember, the NSF is the National Science Foundation. Not only are activities becoming more complex, but changing demands require that the IC, the intelligence community, process different types as well as larger volumes of data. The intelligence community said this in its 1993 MDDS white paper. Consequently, the IC, the intelligence community, is taking a proactive role in stimulating research in the efficient management of massive databases and ensuring that IC requirements can be incorporated or adapted into commercial products. Because the challenges are not unique to any one agency, the Community Management Staff, the CMS, has commissioned a massive digital data systems, MDDS, working group to address the needs and to identify and evaluate possible solutions. So over the next few years, the program's stated aim was to provide more than a dozen grants of several $1 million each to advance this research concept. The grants were to be directed largely through the NSF so that the most promising, successful efforts could be captured as intellectual property and form the basis of companies attracting investments from Silicon Valley. So this type of public to private innovation system helped launch powerful science and technology companies like Qualcomm, Symantec, Netscape, and others, and funded the pivotal research in areas like Doppler radar and fiber optics, which are central to large companies like AccuWeather, Verizon, and AT&T today. Today, the NSF provides nearly 90% of all federal funding for university-based computer science research. And remember, the NSF is the National Science Foundation. They provide nearly 90% of all federal funding for university-based computer science research. So what was the CIA and the NSA's end goal? And remember, the NSA is the National Security Agency. The research arms of the CIA and the NSA hoped that the best computer science minds in academia could identify what they called birds of a feather. Remember that term. Just as geese fly together in large V shapes or flocks of sparrows make sudden movements together in harmony, they predicted that like-minded groups of humans would move together online. The intelligence community named their first unclassified briefing for scientists the Birds of a Feather briefing. And the Birds of a Feather session on the intelligence community initiative in massive digital data systems took place at the Fairmont Hotel in San Jose in the spring of 1995.